It's a treat to be here. I've heard a lot about PopTech, and I've never been here. I just got here, and I'm really looking forward to this interaction. I'm going to talk just for 20 minutes, as we've all been allotted, on a theme that I've really been working through in my columns, which is very simple. Why this is not your parents' energy crisis. Why what is going on today is something fundamentally new and different, and really requires us to think about and redefine the term green in a very different way. And let me just quickly go through the 7 or 8 reasons I believe this is not your parents' energy crisis. The first has to do with the fact that we are in a war on terrorism today, with people funded and fueled by our energy purchases. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we are funding both sides of the war on terrorism. How smart is that? We're funding the U.S. Army, Air Force, Marine Corps, CIA, DIA, NSA with our tax dollars, and we fund Islamic Jihad, Hamas, Al-Qaeda, Saudi Arabia, Iran, and all the charities and institutions that support these groups directly or indirectly with our energy purchases. We are in a war, and we are funding both sides of the war. And we often, or we rarely, I should say, connect the dots. But every once in a while, you can see an event that goes by on the news screen that really shows you the degree to which we aren't connecting the events. And one of those was a couple of years ago, when in the same week, 2 things happened. The first was our Congress, in its infinite wisdom, rejected any attempt to impose higher mileage standards on automakers in Detroit. And in the same week, down in Cancun, Mexico, the World Trade Organization talks collapsed over the refusal of the United States, Japan, and Europe to reduce their subsidies to their farmers, so farmers in the developing world could grow more and sell their products. And when I saw those 2 things happen, I said, let's think about what that actually means. What that meant was that the fact that we weren't improving our CAFE standards, we would make ever-increasing transfer payments via Exxon and Chevron and Shell to Saudi Arabia, which would make ever-increasing transfer payments to various Saudi mosque charities and madrasas. And one of those charities would build a madrasa somewhere in the Muslim world, somewhere like Pakistan, in a village in Pakistan. Now, the same week, by virtue of the fact that we refused to make any compromise on our vast subsidy to our cotton farmers and other farmers, not to mention the Europeans in Japan, we ensured that somewhere out there in the developing world, a cotton farmer, somewhere, say, in Pakistan, just went bankrupt. Now, our cotton farmer has 2 sons. He sends them both to the local madrasa that was just built down the street because they serve a hot lunch every day, and the public school is completely broken down. Madrasa curriculum is very simple. It's almost all religious study courses, no technology, no real science, and 1 poli-sci course, very short course. And the poli-sci course says that all your troubles are because of America, Israel, and Jews. Very short course. Now, one day, one of the sons of our Pakistani cotton farmer decides to join the jihad in Afghanistan against the United States. And one day, one of your sons in U.S. Special Forces kills him. And we think we're winning the war on terrorism. Not a chance. So the first reason this is not your parents' energy crisis is because our consumption of energy, both the scale and the nature of it, is fundamentally related to the geopolitical predicament we're in. Second reason this is not your parents' energy crisis is that the world is flat. The world is flat, and 3 billion new consumers called India, China, and the former Soviet Empire opened up and walked onto the playing field. And when did they arrive? Just when it has been flattened. just when they could plug and play, compete, connect, and collaborate with your kids and mine more efficiently, cheaply than ever before. And they all arrived with their own version of the American dream. A house, a car, a toaster, a microwave, a refrigerator, and a PC with a printer. If we don't find an alternative to fossil fuels to power their future, we're going to burn up, choke up, heat up, and smoke up this planet when it's flat so much faster than even Al Gore predicts. And that leads to the third reason this is not your parents' energy crisis. And that is that clean power, green technology, is going to be the growth industry of the 21st century. It is going to be the growth industry. Mom, Dad, tell your kids, if you want to be sure of a good upper middle class job, go into green design, green manufacturing, green consulting, green services. This is going to be the growth industry of the 21st century. It has to be, or there's going to be no planet. And what that means to me is that China is going to go green. Oh, China is going to go green not because they've read me or Lester or Rachel Carson. China is going to go green because China can't breathe. China is growing at 10% and it's giving back at least 2% now every year in the form of lost work days, gridlock traffic, air pollution, ill health of workers. So China is going to have to go green. And I think green China is going to be an even bigger challenge for us than red China. Because when China goes green, China is going to go green on the basis of low-cost, scalable green technologies. If these technologies aren't low cost for the Chinese market, they won't scale. And if they don't scale, they will not have an impact. And so China, I believe, is poised to become, I think, a major green innovator. Maybe you caught the front page story in the Wall Street Journal last week about Suntech Power Holdings. The richest man in China today is a solar power engineer. If you enjoyed importing all your hybrid engines from Japan, if you loved having to import all your wind turbines from Denmark, you're going to love what you have to import from China. There's only one way for us to confront that challenge, and that is with government regulation that doesn't rig the market, doesn't fix the market, but sets broad, clear, and stringent guidelines on American mileage standards. China's mileage standards today are already more severe than our own. Mileage standards, appliance standards, and power generation standards, like California is doing today. Like a state like Texas did in 1999 with the Texas Renewable Energy Standard. Told the local electric companies, you guys are going to have to produce 2,000 megawatts a year of renewable energy by the year 2009. They all protested. No way, no how. But that visionary Texas governor said, you will do it, and I'm signing this. Who was that man? Who was that man? That man's name was George W. Bush. If only President Bush could meet Governor Bush. The reason a year after the president told us that we are addicted to oil and his government has done nothing of significance to address that deficit, that problem, is precisely because there's a huge fight in this administration between what I would call market fundamentalists who say, just let the market work, led by Dick Cheney. See, the market's working, the price of oil just went down. And those who understand that the role of government is to set broad standards, tough guidelines, and then let the market achieve them. The fourth reason that this is not your parents' energy crisis has to do with the slide. Could you key the slide? Get out of the way here for a second. I'll explain this. I posited this in an article in Foreign Policy magazine a couple months ago. I call it the first law of petropolitics. And the first law of petropolitics states that the price of oil and the pace of freedom operate in an inverse correlation. As the price of oil goes up, the pace of freedom goes down. And as the price of oil goes down, the pace of freedom goes up in what I call petrolist or petro-authoritarian countries. Petrolist or petro-authoritarian countries are countries that are highly dependent on oil for their GDP and have very weak institutions. So Norway is not such a country, but obviously Venezuela, Saudi Arabia, Angola, Equatorial Guinea are. Now basically, I illustrated this. What I did was I plotted the price of oil from 1979 to the present on one graph. And then I overlaid on it for Nigeria, Russia, Venezuela, Saudi Arabia, the Freedom House Freedom Index for these countries. And what you see is roughly this graph. 1979, the price of oil skyrocketed, we know, with the Iranian Revolution. And then it slowly started to decline, cratering in 1995. With all due respect to Ronald Reagan, who brought down the Soviet Union, the price of crude oil, the day the Soviet Union collapsed, hit $16 a barrel. That's not an accident. Now basically, as the price of oil went down, the pace of freedom went up. So the Berlin Wall came down in 1989. Back in the early 90s, Iran was having a free and fair election where all kinds of reformers and reformist parties got elected. Reformist journals and magazines were opening, and Iran's reformist president was calling for a dialogue of civilizations. Yeah, $20, $30 a barrel, Iran was calling for a dialogue of civilization. At $70 a barrel, Iran is calling for the destruction of Israel and declaring that the Holocaust is a myth. I can guarantee you, at $20 a barrel, the Holocaust is not a myth. At $30 a barrel, George Bush looked into Vladimir Putin's soul, the president of Russia, and saw a good man down there. At $70 a barrel, you look into Putin's soul, you'll see Gazprom, Lukos, every TV station and newspaper, not to mention government institution that he's devoured. The price of oil and the pace of freedom operate in an inverse correlation. This is critically important because basically what's happened is that we thought that the fall of the Berlin Wall was going to unleash an unstoppable tide of free markets and free people. And for about 15 years that was the case. But that fall of the wall coincided with oil at $30 to $40 a barrel. As we've moved from a world of $30 to $40 a barrel oil to a world of $60 to $80 a barrel oil, what's happened is that the fall of the Berlin Wall wave has suddenly encountered a counterwave, a counter tide of petro-authoritarian states called Venezuela, Iran, Russia, Angola, Saudi Arabia, Equatorial Guinea, Sudan, and all of these states basically now have petro-authoritarian regimes ensconced in power. And this trend of petro-authoritarianism has the potential to completely poison geopolitics if we see another 10 years of this. Did you follow the debate at the UN a couple weeks ago? The UN Security Council wanted to send peacekeeping troops to Sudan to stop a massive genocide, a documented genocide, open and shut case. The UN wants to send troops to stop a genocide. And guess who blocked it? China. Why? Because China owns 40% of the Sudan Oil Company. That's petropolitics poisoning geopolitics in action. I'll do a little quiz with you. Which was the first Arab Gulf state to run out of oil? Actually, excuse me, which was the first Arab Gulf state to discover oil? The first Arab Gulf state to discover oil was Bahrain, a tiny state off the east coast of Saudi Arabia. The first Arab Gulf state to run out of oil was Bahrain. The first Arab Gulf state to hold a free and fair election where women could run and vote was Bahrain. The first Arab Gulf state to sign a free trade agreement with the United States was Bahrain. And the first Arab Gulf state to completely reform its labor laws, because its people had to work, say it with me now, was Bahrain. This is not an accident, friends. The price of oil and the pace of freedom operate in an inverse correlation. The last reason this is not your parents' energy crisis, very simple. And my host, Bruce Taylor, really helped me think this through. It's very simple. Google and Yahoo are the China and India of the world of bits and bytes. As these companies have to build more server farms, these and every other company, every bank, every brokerage firm, every university, every time you search on Google, you don't think about it, but at the other end of that search is a little burst of power, a little fan cooling that power, okay? And a little meter reading that power. Now, I know you heard this morning about the scale of clicking that's going to happen in the world. The amount of energy that is going to start to consume as everything moves to the web is going to mean that Google and Yahoo become to this energy problem the parallel of what the rise in China and India are. And if we don't find a way to solve that, we are also not only going to run out of energy, but we're going to limit and start to constrict our ability to take advantage of these incredible networks and the power within them. To sum it all up, and for all these reasons, friend, if you want to know what I'm up to in my column, I'm really up to trying to redefine green. I'm a big believer that in the columnist business, to name something is to own it. If you really want to own an issue, you name that issue. The world is flat. And the problem with green, the problem with the word green, is it was subtly named and appropriated all these years by the people who hated it. And they named it liberal, girly man, unpatriotic, sissy, vaguely French. That's what they did. And what I'm all about in my little slice of this campaign is to rename green geopolitical, geostrategic, capitalistic, patriotic. Green, my friends, is the new red, white, and blue. Thank you very much.